Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from one of Spain's most revered saints, Saint Teresa of Avila, a spirited doctor of the Church. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week as we read from Saint Teresa's book, The Interior Castle. Hello and welcome, Catholic pilgrims. Here we are for another great day of learning provided by our beloved Saint Teresa of Avila. I hope that you have grown closer to her through this book. I hope that you see her now as not just another name among many saints, but as a real and true sister to us. One of my hopes with reading the works of the saints is to make them more alive to us. And I hope you are starting to see her as a huge blessing and a powerful intercessor. You know, the thing is that we can't connect with every saint. That just isn't possible here on earth. Some saints are going to stand out to us more. Some are going to be more relatable than others. But the thing with all of them is that they can all teach us something. Just a little something to carry with us. So, I have a question for you today. Are you a crier? Because I am a sentimental fool, I can get choked up pretty easily. Songs move me to tears sometimes, movies, special gifts, anything patriotic. It is not uncommon for me to have tears well up in my eyes. When we get to the part of the Mass where we say, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed," brings tears to my eyes nearly every single time. My kids used to think something was wrong with me and that I was super sad, but they've learned that it's just mom being in love with Jesus. So maybe you aren't a crier. My husband and my oldest child are definitely not criers, and that's okay. Not everyone needs to be a big old ball bag like me, to quote The Notebook. But we can take our crying too far and our emotions when it comes to our spiritual life, and it can make us look silly and disingenuous. And so that is what we're going to talk about after our readings. Our readings today will be from the Sixth Mansion, chapter 6, numbers 6 through 10. And just a word of note, if you are using the same book as me, there is a few typos with regards to the numbers. So just know that we start on 6 and we end on 10. Before we begin, a word from Chrism Press. If you're a true lover of science fiction, you can't miss Markmaker. In a world where tattoos define identity, Miracle Cyrix has sworn to paint the truth. But when he becomes an accomplice in the banishment of an innocent man, he's forced to confront the misery of the outcasts. Mary Jessica Woods has created a world that's both vivid and intricate, full of real characters and deep, lingering themes. Go to chrismpress.com to purchase your copy, and if you use the coupon code Pilgrim15, you get 15% off your first order. Okay, here we go with number 6 of the 6th chapter. In the state I speak of, these longings can sometimes be arrested, for the reason is at liberty to conform to the will of God, and can quote the words of St. Martin. Should these desires become very oppressive, the thoughts may be turned to some other matter. As such longings are generally found in persons far advanced in perfection, the devil may excite them in order to make us think we are of their number. In any case, it is well to be cautious. For my part, I do not believe he could cause the calm and peace given by this pain to the soul, but would disturb it by such uneasiness as we feel when afflicted concerning any worldly matter. A person inexperienced in both kinds of sorrow cannot understand the difference, but thinking such grief an excellent thing, will excite it as much as possible, which greatly injures the health, as these longings are incessant, or at least very frequent. You must also notice that bodily weakness may cause such pain, especially with people of sensitive characters who cry over every trifling trouble. Times without number do they imagine they are mourning for God's sake when they are doing no such thing. If for a considerable space of time, whenever such a person hears the least mention of God or thinks of him at all, these fits of uncontrollable weeping occur. The cause may be an accumulation of humor round the heart, which has a great deal more to do with such tears than has the love of God. Such persons seem as if they would never stop crying. Believing that tears are beneficial, they do not try to check them nor to distract their minds from the subject, but encourage them as much as possible. The devil seizes this opportunity of weakening nuns so that they become unable to pray or to keep their rule. I think you must be puzzling over this and would like to ask what I would have you do, as I see danger in everything. If I am afraid of delusions in so good a thing as tears, perhaps I myself am deluded, and maybe I am. But believe me, I do not say this without having witnessed it in other people, although not in my own case, for there is nothing tender about me, and my heart is so hard as often to grieve me. However, when the fire burns fiercely within, stony as my heart may be, it distills like an alembic. It is easy to know when tears come from this source, for they are soothing and gentle rather than stormy and rarely do any harm. This delusion, when it is won, has the advantage with a humble person of only injuring the body and not the soul. But if one is not humble, it is well to be ever on one's guard. Let us not fancy that if we cry a great deal, we have done all that is needed. Rather, we must work hard and practice the virtues. That is the essential, leaving tears to fall when God sends them, without trying to force ourselves to shed them. Then, if we do not take too much notice of them, they will leave the parched soul of our souls well watered, making it fertile and good fruit. For this is the water which falls from heaven. However, we may tire ourselves in digging to reach it. We shall never get any water like this. Indeed, we may often work and search until we are exhausted without finding as much as a pool, much less a springing well. Therefore, sisters, I think it best for us to place ourselves in the presence of God, contemplate His mercy and grandeur and our own vileness, and leave Him to give us what He will, whether water or drought. For He knows best what is good for us. Thus we enjoy peace, and the devil will have less chance to deceive us. When I was working at the Salvation Army and Domestic Violence Program, I had a coworker named Pam who was an absolute hoot. She was a great mentor to me and just a fun woman to be around. One day, all of the staff leads were in a meeting, and someone that was known to the group had died, and everyone was very sad to hear the news. And out of the blue, Pam said, "At my funeral, I want falling out. I want hired people to weep and wail for me. There must be lots of carrying on." Now, she said this in a joking way, trying to lighten the mood. And I know this because Pam is a strong Christian, and she would actually want a festive celebration of life where everyone is happy and smiling at her funeral, trusting in God's mercy that she will find her way to heaven. But what I didn't catch was the biblical reference that she was making, because at that time I was just on my journey back to my faith. And so I said, "What are you talking about? You want to hire weavers and wailers?" And she said, "Yes, in the Bible, at the death of somebody, if they could afford it, they would have hired people to come and just cry and carry on for the dead." And that seems so bizarre, but it's there in the Bible. In Mark 6:35-40, it says, "While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, 'Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?'" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed him, and then he put them all out. The idea here behind the weepers and the wailers is to show great emotion and to display sorrow over the dead person. But because it is paid for and contrived, it doesn't really mean anything. When I went to the Holy Land, I remember Lori, our pilgrimage leader, said that a lot of people feel like they have to work themselves up with emotions, especially when going to some of the most significant spots, like the church in Nazareth where Jesus was born, the Holy Sepulchre, the Upper Room, very important spots where Christ was. And she said she had one lady who had been there before tell another lady right before they were getting ready to go into the upper room. She said, "You are really going to be overwhelmed when you go in here. I could barely contain my emotions when I went in here for the first time. Just wait till you feel it." The other lady went into the upper room, and when she wasn't overcome with tears and great emotion, she felt that something was wrong with her, but nothing was wrong with her. St. Teresa tells us today, quote, "Times without number do they imagine they are mourning for God's sake when they are doing no such thing. If for a considerable space of time, whenever such a person hears the least mention of God or thinks of him at all, these fits of uncontrollable weeping occur, the cause may be an accumulation of humor around the heart, which has a great deal more to do with such tears than has the love of God." Unquote. She continues, quote, "Believing that tears are beneficial, they do not try to check them nor distract their minds from the subject, but encourage them as much as possible." Unquote. The point of all this is to say there is no need to work yourself into a tearful frenzy over God in order to seem like you are really pious or really feeling the moment. We don't need to lose our dignity and put on a show. That's what the hired people were for, putting on a show. But this also doesn't mean that we can't ever cry or be overwhelmed by God's love. Best to take St. Teresa's advice. She says, quote, "Let us not fancy that if we cry a great deal, we have done all that is needed. Rather, we must work hard and practice the virtues. That is the essential. Leaving tears to fall when God sends them, without trying to force ourselves to shed them." She also says, quote, "It is easy to know when tears come from this source, for they are soothing and gentle rather than stormy and rarely do any harm." Unquote. Again, as I said before in other podcasts, we must maintain our dignity and composure when dealing with our spiritual life, with anything really. That isn't to say that we can't be emotional and that we must always be stoic and like statues, but it is to say that we should never try to force anything in order to have others think that we are super pious or to kid ourselves into thinking so. We must remember others could be watching us, and if our example is one where it looks like a show rather than true, honest piety, it will come off as false and unappealing. And so that's just something to think about. That will be all, Catholic pilgrims. I imagine St. Teresa was not a weeper. She even tells us that when she says she has a bit of a stony heart. And when I read that, I had to laugh because at least she's honest about herself. But with that, have a good day, Catholic pilgrims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.